The craziest time in the NBA season is here. Rumors flying everywhere. Will the Suns find the heir apparent for Chris Paul at the trade deadline? And do they have a new GM incoming? We'll talk about it all on today's episode of Locked On Suns. Let's go.
You are Locked On Suns, your daily Phoenix Suns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We are back. This is Locked On Phoenix Suns. We are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, and I'm your host, Brendon Kleen, a credentialed media member covering the Suns for the past 6 seasons, a writer at Suns.com, and I have a new announcement, a host of the Just Basketball podcast. We will be launching here on Wednesday. We're recording this. You'll see it all, and you'll hear this on Thursday, but check it out, please. Very excited. Chris Manning and I, the host of Locked On Cavs here on the network, a buddy of mine, we are going to be doing that show. So you'll hear more of it, whether I guess you want to or not. But go ahead and hit subscribe and follow over there. And wherever you're finding this show, this is not going anywhere. This will not change. If you're finding us on YouTube, if you're finding us on your favorite podcast platform, hit follow, subscribe, get this show in your feed every single Monday through Friday to get up to date on your favorite team. You can also follow along at Locked On PHX Suns, where on game nights we have our 7 takes or less, and you can keep up with the Suns that way as well. It is Thursday. Aaron Edwards is here. We are on a game day, but we have a ton of news to get to. Aaron, please tell me, I saw your tweets this morning. I have to ask you, I know this is not an NFL podcast, but how are you feeling about Jeff Saturday and his reign over your NFL franchise, the Indianapolis Colts? Are you embracing? Is Saturday? Is it going to be Saturday every day of the week from now on? What's up, man? Tell me, please.
No, I think he's just a ring of honor on our team and in our organization. So they have to do this technically. So I really think it is just us trying to do right by him and not embarrass him pretty much. But I don't think he's getting the job. I just think they are just trying to. Chris Ballard says that Jim Irsay gave him all the tools to pick the coach. And if we do pick Saturday, we're going to know that's a lie. So that's all it comes down to. Either our GM is actually doing his job or our owner is our GM.
I think, unfortunately, in the NFL and a lot of sports teams, actually a topic we're going to hit on later in this show is that the second thing you said tends to be the truth, which is that the owner is really the guy with the keys to the kingdom. But I won't rub it in too much. It sounds like you're at the copium stage of what's going on here. So I will just say, for the record, I texted you the minute the news came down months ago saying he will be the coach next year.
You did say that.
I'm staying on that. I'm not backing down. Today's show, guys, brought to you by the FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. Make every moment more. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn today to get started. All right, so I saved it for us to talk about today, Aaron, the report from Mark Stein, which I think it backs up a lot of what the random rumors here and there had kind of indicated if you were reading the tea leaves, but it was the most concrete thing, which is basically that Mark Stein put in his newsletter that the Suns are looking kind of past Chris Paul a little bit, and that league executives are actually feeling that for the first time. He listed off Emmanuel Quickly, who I don't feel like should be put in the same sentence as Chris Paul personally. Terry Rozier, who we've heard about a lot, especially even dating back to the Ayton stuff with the sign and trade with the Hornets when that was talked about. And then Fred VanVleet, who I did do a pretty deep dive on as a potential Ayton trade last week or earlier this week. You and I have talked about moving on from Chris Paul. I don't think that part of it is a surprise. Yeah. Do you feel like it's actually realistic that something like that would happen in season before the deadline? That's the part that tripped me up.
It would, I think I say this a lot, it would be real NFL-y. And I think when you first said that during the summer that we should probably start looking toward getting rid of Chris Paul, and it was like one of our takes or something. And I was like, it seemed like a thing we should do, but it just seemed like a thing that Bill Belichick would do, sort of like, let's get rid of you before you start hurting us kind of thing. And yes, like I think we should like technically like start looking and putting out feelers for moving on from this. Like he's going to be owed a lot of money. So I think that like, yeah, it just didn't seem like an NBA thing. He helped us make the jump to the finals 2 years ago, and we have the best record in the league last year. And to just be like, that cliff is coming, let's beat them to it. It's just really like the NFL. And I just couldn't see the Suns pulling off a thing like that. But we got new ownership, and he's a billionaire, and billionaires can be pretty cutthroat. And I can see that kind of going that way.
Yeah, this is going to lead into our part 2 of this show pretty nicely with some rumors around a high-level executive potentially moving teams. The Suns were listed there, but on the topic of Chris Paul, I think the one thing that makes this a little bit more NFL-ish, to your point, is Chris Paul's contract isn't guaranteed, right? And
Yeah.
we know that cliff is kind of coming for the Suns, where no pun intended. I know the State Farm stuff. I said cliff. It's all right. The $15 million he's guaranteed next year, and then $0 million fully non-guaranteed the year after that. We've talked about how it would look to stretch him. They obviously could trade him this summer, and it might help the trade happen if the team getting him knew that they could move on from him. I don't think it's crazy to imagine a situation where Chris Paul is bought out this summer and he goes to another team on a smaller contract. He'd be losing out on $15 million potentially. I would imagine more likely is the stretch, whatever it all ends up being, or he'd be losing out on the full 30. I don't know how it all happens. He could be, going to the Lakers or something as soon as July of this year. So I get it, trying to move quickly in that regard, where you're going to try to say, hey, we're not going to trade Chris Paul. James Jones might not want to trade Chris Paul right now, but at least let's use some pieces to go get somebody who might actually be his replacement, even if he's still on the team. The part that's funny when you look at the guys that Mark Stein listed are, one, I don't know what it is with the Suns and point guards under 6 feet. I don't know why it's always just going to have to be short guys, because VanVleet and Rozier are both like the two smallest dudes outside of Chris Paul who actually play minutes in the NBA. Now that Isaiah Thomas is out of here, and Quickly, who frankly, he's not even worth putting in the same conversation. I think he's a role player. That made me laugh, but I get that if you're going to make a move, do it in season now just to replace him sooner. But then you get into that mix of, okay, well then are you going to have Fred VanVleet or Chris Paul coming off the bench for the stretch run of the season? It's hard to make it work in 2.5 weeks that they're going to be able to pull something off that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think I said a show ago or 2 shows ago that regardless of what happens, if we do get a point guard or we do find like a scoring point guard on our team or something like that, I think it would be smarter for Chris Paul to come off the bench. I mean, I know he's older and it'll probably take a little longer for him to get warmed up, but I really think just a second unit point guard is kind of where we're at. I mean, he's been playing great the last couple of games, but I think playoff wise, it would just help with some of the second unit stuff that we still haven't really figured out that much. I mean, we still have injuries and stuff like that, but I think if we get a scoring point guard, it wouldn't be him getting pressed for 2.5 quarters and exhausted by game 3. I think it would just help a lot of things with our team. But yeah, like I can see us just like, we've known we need another point guard for 2 years now. Like, I don't think us looking now to replace Chris Paul is even the first start. We've needed a backup point guard even for that long. So I don't we should probably start looking toward Chris Paul's replacement, but we need a replacement for that replacement too. So it's just still a lot of stuff that we need to get done.
Yeah, I guess what I'll say is I think you're totally right. They need to do something there anyway. So if whether we want to call it somebody who could replace Chris Paul or it's just a guard, I don't think it necessarily matters. The framing, I don't think it's a huge deal as far as, they could play 3 guards and have Book be like the 3 in certain lineups. We know Cam Johnson's not going to be somebody even probably come playoff time who's a 40-minute per game guy. I just don't think that they should be doing that. So then you're talking about some more minutes being open. campaign is not exactly like locked into his slot. He could even be traded. He's non-guaranteed next year. There's all sorts of ways you could cut it up. I'll just say I feel like what I don't think we'll see is something before the deadline that's at the level of a Fred VanVleet, because I do think you're going to run into some politics in the locker room. I mean, VanVleet wants to go to a team that's going to extend and re-sign him. How's he going to feel about, all right, Fred, like, come on down, and then you're going to come off the bench and play 25 minutes, or is Chris feel good enough about, like you said, he's been playing okay. It's not like this guy's just cratered this season to where it's going to be, all right, you're like Carmelo Anthony. It's like, it sucked for Melo, but we knew it was time for that, right? It wasn't like some sort of punishment or shock thing. So I don't think that Chris Paul's at that point where he'll just kind of go down quietly and go to the bench. It would have to be somebody who's genuinely better than him. And I just feel like it'd be hard to see a trade for that caliber of player. And I don't even know if VanVleet is. I mean, you never know how guys feel about each other and what how their personalities rub in. It's just, that would be a humongous thing to do in the middle of a season. And that's where I come down. But as I said, the decision maker at the top of all of this is probably the most important factor in whether we would see a big move like this actually go down. The Suns were linked to Bob Myers. We'll talk about how likely it is that the guy who built a dynasty would actually come to Phoenix. Might be more likely than you thought based on a recent report here on Wednesday. We'll get to that in just a second. First, today's show, guys, brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the new sports betting partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. We're super excited to partner with the number one sportsbook in America, FanDuel. And if you're new to FanDuel, well, that's even better. They have so many great features to make betting on sports fun and easy. Here in Phoenix, obviously, we have the extra connection that FanDuel has a sportsbook inside of the Phoenix Suns arena over at Footprint Center. New customers who join today on the online sportsbook can get started with $150 in free bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just sign up at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel has all your favorite bets from the money line to point spreads to player props. Plus, you can even combine your bets for more money, more fun with a same game parlay. Chance at an even bigger payout. We have pro basketball odds, NBA odds over on Wednesday night already up as I'm recording this on Wednesday morning. We have conference championship odds. The Chiefs are 1.5 point underdogs, the Mahomes effect over at home. And then the Eagles are 2.5 point favorites at home as well. Those games will be fun. Tons of parlays, tons of props on those, I'm sure. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. So football fans, don't miss out. Place your first $5 bet to get $150 in free bets, win or lose, at FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, so Bob Myers, longtime executive, I think 10 years he's been there with the Warriors, Aaron. And right before we went on to record today on Wednesday morning here, The Athletic posted a story with all two of their big Warriors guys, and then Sam Amick, who's kind of their top NBA insider. He's like the windhorse to Shams' Woj a little bit over at The Athletic. And they had it that not only is Myers leaving in July when his contract runs out, more likely than maybe we really thought, but it's also, to the point where other teams are starting to maybe think about actually hiring him. Rival teams are thinking he might leave. It feels legit. And they went so far as to name the Suns in addition to, I believe, the Wizards and the Knicks in this report. Whatever direction you want to take it, Aaron, whether it's the Myers side, the Suns side, the Warriors side, what did you make of seeing this news come down to the guy who's maybe the most, accomplished executive in the NBA, potentially calling it quits with his team?
Yeah, I kind of saw him leaving. You can kind of feel it. It seemed like he wasn't renewing, and it felt like the KD thing, but only not as dramatic. Sometimes the dudes just get tired. I'm a Cubs fan. When Epstein left, it was he just didn't want to do the grind of that place anymore. Kind of just, he was one of those dudes that fixed the place and left after. I mean, Bob Myers did this longer, but you can just kind of feel the vibe of him wanting to start something different. He's had one of the greatest shooters, or the greatest shooter of all time, for the last couple of years. He lucked into signing him to a really cheap contract because of ankles and built a dynasty off of that. And yeah, like I can see it just kind of being done. Like the Draymond stuff's probably going to get ugly. Doesn't want to deal with that. The Clay stuff's going to probably get ugly. He doesn't want to deal with that. Like I think he just wants to start something new and not have to do those really tough conversations that are about to come. He's kind of just leaving like before the sanctions get here, like a college coach. He's just like, all right, later I'm going to the NBA or NFL. Like you guys can deal with this stuff. And it kind of just got those vibes. Like there are some contract conversations that are about to come up, and I don't think he wants to deal with them there.
Yeah, the other key thing in here was, I guess there's some disagreement. I don't even know how this really happens. I'm sure it's part of it, like, what's guaranteed versus what's like there as incentives within these guys' contracts. But he seems to feel like, and maybe other teams around the NBA feel like he's, in the top 10 in terms of pay, but definitely not at the very top. Whereas the owner went on a podcast, I guess, in January and said that that Myers is top 3 in terms of general managers in pay. And I could see that, right? It's like they list out that burnout and some of the stuff you talked about, like with Epstein, is a factor. I think we're all human. You might feel burned out, but if you get a huge raise, you can deal with the burnout a little bit, right? Like that's life a little bit. And so when I think about where he might go, and maybe even if it would ever make sense for the Suns, I feel like you're talking about a promotion where maybe he actually has to do less work day to day combined with a raise. So more responsibility, less work, which is what happens when you're very wealthy and accomplished. I think I could see that. And the only way I could see that fitting for the Suns is James Jones just got a promotion to president of basketball operations. So before you might have said, all right, put somebody like Myers over Jones, keep Jones as the general manager. That option's not really there anymore. So I guess it would be you either fire Jones, which I don't know how likely you think that is. We've talked about it a couple times. Or I guess you make Myers the president of the whole organization, which is like the Masai Ujiri thing, where he's like the business, like he runs the business of the team in addition to, being hands-on in basketball. Like he would replace Jason Rowley for the Suns more so than James Jones. I don't know if Myers has the skill set to do that, but that's kind of the only way I could wrap my mind around it. Either Matt Ishbia comes in and fires James Jones, replaces him with somebody like Bob Myers, or they find a way to bring Myers in at an even higher level.
Yeah, I can see the higher level thing. I mean, James Jones still just got executive of the year like a couple years ago, and he just got a promotion. And yeah, it just wouldn't make any sense to fire him. But I can see them hiring a 5-time champion dude that had built a dynasty and just putting him in a higher position. Phil Jackson got that position in the Knicks and pretty much destroyed them. So I think that Bob Myers getting in a position like that while having like the chops to and the resume of team building, I think Matt Ishbia, I think he wants to build like an executive staff that shows that we can be champions, and that would be a big leap to doing that.
And if it is a matter of a raise, I think Ishbia would definitely be fine with saying, like, I don't know if he'll spend like this for his whole time, but we know these guys love to make a splash. And if it was like, I'm going to one up the Warriors in my pocketbook, I could definitely see, Ishbia liking how that sounds. The part of this that it reminded me of a little bit from a Sun standpoint, I don't know if you've thought about this or have any more of a read on it than me, but do we know why why James Jones was able to be promoted to president? We've heard so much stuff that actually Sarver still has oversight over. No, they actually can't make trades. They can't actually fire the executive staff of the team and this and that. And yet it sounds like, and I don't know if it's the full truth, but from everything we've heard, Sam Garvin just was super smitten with James Jones and decided he deserved a promotion in the middle of all this chaos. They gave a guy a promotion and probably a raise from what we would probably assume there.
Yeah.
What the heck? That's the part I keep coming back to where I'm like, it complicates everything. And it wasn't even decided by anybody who actually will have a say 2 months from now. It makes no sense to me.
Yeah, it just seemed like one of those fake badges that you like get, or like wings on like a plane as a kid. Like it's like they did it just to do it and just to have some news to like put out that wasn't all the bad news that we were getting. So it just seemed like they were kind of just extinguishing like all the bad news that was coming out. And they were like, look, we gave James Jones a promotion, like he can do more stuff. I mean, he hasn't done the stuff, but they're just like trying
theoretically.
Yes, they're like theoretically he can make stuff happen now, and he doesn't have to answer to that many people anymore. And yeah, it didn't really do anything.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he didn't get a raise. It could be, like maybe it was just ceremonial. Like when you like if you go back and read or listen to what he said. He did a little media availability. I wasn't at it, but I think it was at a practice like the next day or the day of when it got announced. He was like, yeah, not much will change. So, I mean, maybe we take him at his word. And it was just sort of like Sam Garvin wanted some good PR out there. You might be right. I don't think that's the craziest read on it. I mean, he had just gotten an extension. I don't know exactly who would be signing off on a raise if Jay Crowder can't even get traded with his small salary. So, that very well could be the case. The fun part about all this is all these titles and everything, it's all fake. So it doesn't mean anything to say I'm the president. It could be that you get a promotion. And I mean, we're just talking about it with Jeff Saturday, right? Like I said, could call somebody the general manager. We could give a press conference saying he has oversight over, hiring a head coach. That doesn't mean any of that is actually true. Let's spin over to the Western Conference standings, Aaron. The Suns are tied for 6th after their win last night. They are a half game behind the Clippers for 5th. I want to go through and at least start to talk about some play-in possibilities, what teams the Suns want to avoid having to worry about, how the standings might stack up by the end of the season. We'll do that after one more quick break. The Clippers, Mavericks, Suns, Jazz, Timberwolves, Warriors, Thunder, and and Blazers, and you could even throw the Lakers in there, Aaron, are all separated by 2.5 games in the standings, maybe 3 games if you go all the way up to the Clippers. And that is spots number 5 through 13 in the West. Now, a lot of people have been talking about this, but I think the part that is craziest to me is how far into the season we are. Like, this is not one of those cute little, wow, there's everybody's jumbled and look at the Jazz like we were doing in like early November.
Yeah.
It's like we're here, and these teams are it feels like they're going to be separated by nothing. Like tiebreakers are going to matter. These teams, head to head, all that stuff is going to be very, very important. First of all, tell me your read on whether it's the Suns' possibilities and likelihood of winning a play-in game, or even like your psychological state watching the Suns in a play-in game, because that feels very real. And I've enjoyed watching the play-in game as somebody who doesn't care about the result. I think it would be very different if I was at the game or watching it and had a vested interest in the outcome, because those single elimination games are no joke.
Yeah, I think it would be a struggle to watch the Suns in the play-in game. The last play-in win-or-go-home game, we got blown out by 40. So I think I wouldn't trust the team that's constructed now to do it. Like, I would be so stressed. Like, if we go on any little scoring drought, like if Book isn't 100%, anything like any lull coming from the bench, like anything, it would just bring back flashbacks. And I wouldn't want us to do a play. I don't think we're going to do a play-in game. I'm starting to get the feeling that we weathered that terrible storm of all the injuries, and the team's we have shooting. Cam is letting it fly. Like, I think all of that stuff coming together makes us, and at least I think we said last week, we just want to be average. And I think we're about to go back to at least average to above average. And yeah, that's not a championship team, but I can see us like not being a play-in team at this point. The play-in teams are bad. And I think that being average is pretty good. I see the Blazers are a play-in team, and we're not that bad. Yeah.
Yeah. I think I said this on Monday's show, like, It's not great analysis, but at the end of the day, I think, like you just said, the Suns are just better than some of these teams. Like even if they're struggling, even if the roster is incomplete, we don't know what it'll look like. I'm gonna go ahead and lock it in that the Suns are a more talented team than the Thunder. You know, they're a more talented team than the Minnesota Timberwolves. They're a more talented team than the Utah Jazz. Like, if that, maybe that doesn't mean that they get that. I'm not, getting cocky about that stuff, but I mean, come on, like, they have the talent. They were a 64 win team last year. We know what they're capable of. I'm not saying they're going to win the championship, but I am saying they should be able to get out of the play-in and into the 5 or 6 seed if they, play good basketball and stay healthy. As far as the late game situation, I just have a point about that. Just the idea of, early fourth quarter, Chris Paul on the bench, Devin Booker, he's already at 29 minutes in the beginning of the fourth quarter, and Cam Payne, Ish Wainwright, and, Bismack Biyombo are out there with him. I could just see Suns fans won't have any fingernails. They'll be, emptying all the bottles in their house. It'll be a very big problem here in Phoenix, but I think
James Jones would not be able to check his Twitter mentions if that was the lineup in the fourth quarter.
Oh, yeah. Well, Monty Williams probably as well. I mean, we've talked a lot about who they might get. We haven't talked about if Monty will play those guys. That'll be a separate conversation. Hey, here's Jordan Clarkson. What do you think? And then Monty's like, hey, Landry, you're in,
Yeah.
But as far as who they would play, I think one thing I will say for sure is I think Suns fans should probably be dreading a couple of different things. One would be the Pelicans get to 3,
Yes,
and the Suns get to 6. Bad news, I would say. Or Mavs get to 4 and Suns get to 5. Also bad news. Those are probably the two, just looking at the standings right now, that would really make me nervous if I was a Suns fan, which, depending on the day, I am and am not. I don't know. Is it crazy? Let me put this to you. Is it crazy for me to have more confidence from a Suns standpoint against Memphis and Denver than New Orleans and Dallas? Is that just like not revisionist history, but prisoner of the moment type mentality of those are the two teams we saw them struggle with last year? Because I feel like they could beat Denver and Memphis 4 times out of 7 more easily than I could see them against New Orleans, for instance.
Yeah, like I think when you were talking about, like, yes, we're more talented than the Thunder, we're more talented than the Blazers, we're more talented than the Timberwolves, and like technically we are more talented than Dallas, but I'm glad you didn't say them because Luka owns us, and it's really like we kind of just have to give in to that he does. So yes, I would not want to do another series like that, especially with the point guard situation, because Jason Kidd's just going to do the same thing he did last time, just lean on Chris Paul and wait till games 2, 3, or 4, and wait till his legs go. And they will go because that's just what happens. You lean on him and press him, and then New Orleans is going to do the same thing with Alvarado, lean on him and press him and until his legs go. And I mean, like, yeah, he went 14-14 in the closeout game, but I think they just have the talent now. They're really talented. They have Zion back, and I think that would just like be a struggle for us. And yeah, Denver, Murray is sort of coming back, but it's still going to take a while. He's not going to – a series is really hard after you tear your ACL, and I think that's going to be tough for him. Ayton still knows how to guard Jokic. I mean, technically, it's been a while, and Ayton's defense has kind of faltered a little bit. And Memphis, they're just one job bad game away, or he hasn't even finished a playoff series yet without getting injured.
Yeah.
So they're just one job away from not being Memphis anymore. So yeah, I can see them being a little bit easier. I mean, Memphis is still really talented, but I think we know how to play them.
Yeah. I don't want – I feel like I walked you into a trap where you had to own my take there. You don't have to
like,
believe in that they could beat the Nuggets or the Grizzlies. I feel like that's a crazy thing to say because I feel like Jokic is better than Booker. I feel like Ja is at least on the same playing field, and their depth and talent is probably better overall. But I think from the Grizzlies standpoint, they're young. And like you said, you talked about Ja not finishing a playoff series. Jaren got through the playoffs healthy, played a ton of minutes last year. I think that kind of goes overlooked, but he's never a sure thing.
He found out of like every game though.
That too. Yeah, maybe it helped to not have to play, 40 minutes a night like, superstar players often do, because he did deal with foul trouble here and there. And then the Nuggets, it's exactly what you said. If you told me the Nuggets would have everybody and they're at their best, I don't think the Suns beat that team. But that's not a sure thing. And I do think the Suns have had some success against Jokic. Now, that success was when he had, Austin Rivers and Facundo Campazzo spacing the floor, not, Jamal Murray, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, etc. But I feel like I've seen it. The Suns have struggled with the Nuggets this year, though. That's for sure. So I don't know. I just think, I guess if I'm coming at it and we know the Suns from like a psyche standpoint, I think going right back into the two opponents, the two types of series that they just got embarrassed in, which I know they beat the Pelicans, but people were already starting to question and kind of criticize and mock them with how much that they struggled in that series. And then they obviously lost to Dallas. I just think that would be hard in the first round to have to dive right back in. They're going to have to beat all these teams if they're going to go where they theoretically want to go. But I just think for the first round, I would be trying to avoid that. I would be willing to intentionally lose games if I'm the Suns to get out of that. I would be willing to do whatever it takes to just say, hey, like, let's play the Clippers in the first round, or like, whatever, like that. The Kings, great. Sounds awesome. That's where I'm at.
Yeah, I think the roles are kind of reversed though. I think that if we do play Memphis or Denver, like, they're better and they're like probably more talented, but I think it would be different than last year. I think we'd be the annoying, scrappy team that they kind of don't want to play. Like, I think it would just be like, they've been here and we kind of wanted an easy one in the first round, and now we're playing a team that won 64 games last year. So I think it would be more annoying for them than it would be for us, because now, like, we would kind of be like, hey, like, we don't have home court advantage. Like, we're the scrappy team. Like, let's just annoy the shit out of Denver or Memphis. But with Dallas and New Orleans, it's just like, oh, God. Like, they know us. They know what we hate. Yeah. They know what frustrates this team. They know all the stuff. And I think that would probably be the struggle for it.
That's a great way to put it. It's kind of setting up for the Suns to be what the Lakers were to the Suns the year they made the finals, right? Where it's like, hold up, we get all the way to the second seed in the West, and then we're playing LeBron James and Anthony Davis, and they're the 7th seed, and we might as well not even have home court advantage, because who cares? And we have to play this team we have had a bad history with, and on and on. So I think that's the optimistic way to look at it, is that the Suns, no matter who they play, they're going to be the pain in the ass that no one wants to deal with. But I do think from their standpoint, Dallas and New Orleans aren't going to be afraid of them like that, like you said. So it'll be interesting. And there's not a lot of games left, which is part of why I wanted to bring this up. I mean, we'll see what the trade deadline does to all these teams, and they'll get some rest at the All-Star break, but it's a sprint at this point. The Suns have a lot of games at home after this early February road trip, but that doesn't guarantee anything. They have a pretty tough schedule. They have a couple games against the Nuggets late in the season. They have a lot of Western Conference games still to play. That'll wrap us up for today, though, guys. We have Suns Mavericks, coincidentally, tonight on TNT, 8 o'clock. I will be there. Let's hope it's not as ugly as the last time. Although, actually, the last time was opening night. That was pretty fun, but we will see. I'll be right here for you with the recap post-game. Hit subscribe, hit follow. Thanks for making Locked On Suns your first listen here on this Thursday. Do it again tomorrow. In the meantime, go make Locked On Sports today your second listen to get caught up, get ready for conference championship weekend, get all the news across the whole sports world that you need. That show's available on all podcast platforms. I will talk to you all tomorrow.